My parents told me good sons sacrifice everything, and for years I believed it. But the moment I refused, everything shifted, and the person I trusted least revealed their hand first. My name's Oliver, and for as long as I can remember, I wasn't really treated like a son, or a nephew, or even a brother. No, my role in the family was different. I was more like a utility. A stand-in for responsibility. A walking wallet they could lean on whenever something inconvenient came up. Not in that warm, we love you but we need your help sometimes, kind of way. No. This was colder. Calculated. Like they saw me as an asset to be managed, not a person to be loved. But before I get ahead of myself, let me paint the picture. I grew up in a house where appearances mattered more than honesty or care. My parents, let's call them Martin and Claudine, were obsessed with how the world saw them. They wanted to be admired, respected, the type of couple people whispered about at church or community events. What a generous, upstanding family. Behind closed doors though? It was a different story. They had endless praise and resources for my cousin, Isla, who, let me remind you, wasn't even their child, while acting like my achievements were some kind of inconvenience. Like my successes pulled attention away from where they thought it truly belonged, on her. And then there was my aunt, Miel, Isla's mother. She never once spoke to me like family. Every interaction felt like I was at a bank counter and she was the customer. No, how are you, Oliver? No, congratulations, we're proud of you. It was always, here's what Isla needs. When can you cover it? For years, I put up with it. Maybe because I didn't want to start a war. Or maybe, deep down, I kept hoping that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, my parents might finally look at me the way they looked at Isla. Like I actually mattered. That hope shattered on the day of my college graduation. I had worked myself to the bone for that moment. Juggling classes, late-night study sessions, shifts at the library, and tutoring gigs just to keep a roof over my head and food on the table. No handouts from them. Not a cent. And somehow, I still managed to save a little. Nothing life-changing, but enough to remind me that I could stand on my own 2 feet. Graduation day was supposed to be my moment. I'd even been chosen as one of the student speakers, a huge honor. I'd practiced that speech 100 times, making sure to thank the people who truly carried me through, my professors, my friends, even my boss at the library. Not my family. They hadn't earned that mention. As I sat in the waiting area, cap and gown straightened, I kept glancing at my phone. Hoping for at least a good luck text. Nothing. When it was finally my turn, I walked across the stage, shook hands, held that diploma high, and searched the audience. Families were on their feet, clapping, cheering, crying. And then, there it was. The row where my family was supposed to sit. Empty. Completely empty. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to smile. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe an emergency came up. I couldn't let myself believe they just didn't bother showing up. After the ceremony, friends' families pulled me into their celebrations. Parents hugging their kids. Siblings snapping photos. Restaurant tables already reserved for their parties. I smiled, I thanked them, and then I lied. I told them I had my own plans. The truth? I walked home alone. Diploma in one hand, phone in the other, waiting for something, anything, from my family. And that's when my phone buzzed. A message. My heart jumped, until I opened it. It wasn't congratulations. It wasn't pride. It wasn't even from my parents. It was from my aunt, Miel. Her words? Cold. Transactional. Almost like a memo from a boss. Oliver, I heard you've been saving from your library job. Isla's tuition bill came in higher than expected. Since you don't have many expenses, it makes sense for you to contribute. Think of it as helping family. I'll send you the details. I just froze there on the sidewalk, staring at the screen. Not a single word about my achievement. Not a single acknowledgement that I had just graduated. My parents hadn't even called. But suddenly, miraculously, when Isla's tuition was on the line, they could find the time to reach out. The anger didn't hit me all at once. It seeped in slow, heavy, suffocating. Like a weighted blanket pressing down tighter with every second I stared at that text. I didn't reply. I shoved my phone into my pocket, kept walking, but those words? They branded themselves into my mind. And in that moment, I realized, I would never be anything more to them than a resource. But I also realized something else. Something that would change everything. Because if they thought I was just going to keep playing the role they assigned me, they had no idea what was coming next. That night, I did something I'd been putting off for far too long. I called my parents. Half of me still hoped they'd have some kind of explanation. Some excuse, even a flimsy one, that could at least soften the sting of that empty row at my graduation. My father answered, his tone distracted, like I'd interrupted something more important. When I brought up the message from Aunt Miel, he sighed and said, "Oh well, you know your aunt worries about Isla's future. You're doing well for yourself, son. You don't need much. She's under a lot of pressure with tuition." I sat there gripping the phone tighter, forcing my voice to stay calm. Dad, it was my graduation today. I walked across that stage. I gave a speech. And not one person from our family showed up. There was silence, long enough that I thought the line had gone dead, before my mother's voice cut in. Sharper. Colder. "Oliver, stop making this about you. We can't attend everything. Isla has real responsibilities. Her education is expensive. You should be proud to help." Something inside me cracked right then. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just hung up. And I lay in my apartment that night, staring at the ceiling. My diploma sat untouched on the desk in its leather case, a symbol I'd once thought would make me proud. But instead of joy, all I felt was this hollow, sinking certainty. No matter how hard I worked, no matter what I accomplished, I'd never be anything more to them than a backup plan for Isla. That's when I made my choice. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I ignored Miel's message. For the first time, I didn't explain myself, didn't try to smooth things over. I thought maybe silence would speak louder than any reply I could give. But in my family, silence doesn't last long. 2 days later, my phone rang. Isla's name lit up the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. She didn't even bother with hello. Oliver, Mom said you've been saving. She told me you'd help with my tuition this semester. Did you send the money yet? I was standing in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, my free hand curling into a fist against the countertop. She said it so casually, like I was a bank app she could refresh. No, I said, slow and deliberate, forcing my voice to stay steady. I didn't agree to that. There was a pause. Then she gave this breathy sound, half laugh, half disbelief. Come on, Oliver. You don't have any real expenses. You live in some tiny apartment. What do you even need savings for? I'm in college. This is serious. The irony almost made me choke. I wanted to remind her that I had just finished college. That I'd paid for every semester myself, while she got everything handed to her. But I knew it wouldn't matter. So I told her flatly, I'm not giving you my savings, Isla. Her voice dropped, all for reasonable, coded in entitlement. So you're just going to let me struggle? After everything Mom and your parents have done for you? And that's when I asked myself, what had they really done for me? Sure, they'd given me a roof and food when I was a kid. But love? Encouragement? Showing up when it counted? No. When I published my first paper, when I won a departmental award, when I got into the honors program, they were too busy. But when Isla needed something, suddenly the world stopped spinning until she was taken care of. I don't owe you anything, I said finally. And before she could respond, I ended the call. That silence afterward, it hung heavy for days. But like always, it didn't last. A week later, my father sent me a message. Short, cold, more like an order than an invitation. We're having dinner this weekend. Everyone will be here. You need to come. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Stay in my little apartment, cook a simple meal, let the world move on without me. But another part of me knew, I had to go. Not for reconciliation. That hope had already died the night of my graduation. No. I was going to that dinner for one reason only, to look them all in the eye and make it clear. I wasn't their safety net anymore. When Saturday finally came, I dressed the way a man does when he doesn't want to give anyone ammunition. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive, just a plain shirt and dark pants. Neutral. Safe. Something they couldn't twist into a comment. As I drove over, my stomach twisted, not from nerves, but from the sheer weight of everything unsaid. Every mile closer felt like dragging chains. And then I pulled up to the house. It looked exactly the same. White shutters, hedges trimmed with almost military precision, that wreath on the door my mother refused to take down, even out of season. The place was frozen in time. Meanwhile, I felt like I'd lived a lifetime since I'd last stepped inside. The moment I walked through the door, the air hit me like a wall. Heavy. Tense. Like everyone had been holding their breath, waiting. Isla sat at the table already, chin high, thumbs moving lazily over her phone like she was too important to acknowledge me. Miel was next to her, laughing with my mother about some fundraiser, the kind of hollow conversation they love to parade for appearances. And my father, of course, was at the head of the table, newspaper folded neatly beside his plate, eyes calm, expression unreadable. "Oh, my mother said. Her tone was ice. You're late." "I'm here," I answered, pulling out a chair. We ate in a strange, brittle silence at first. My father droned about the weather, about the neighborhood. My mother rattled on about a family friend's promotion. None of it was directed at me. It felt like I'd been dropped into a play where everyone else knew their lines, and mine had been cut. Then, finally, the curtain lifted. "Oliver," Miel said, her smile polite, her eyes anything but. "We've been meaning to discuss something important. Here it comes. Isla's tuition has increased this semester. We all think it's only fair that you help contribute. After all, you're working now. You don't have a family to support. It just makes sense for you to step up while she finishes her degree. No congratulations. No acknowledgement. Not even a token nod to my graduation. Just straight to the point, hand it over." I set my fork down slowly, carefully. "I'm not giving Isla my savings." The room went quiet except for the faint clink of Isla's spoon against her glass. She looked up, her eyes wide with mock innocence. "Why not? You know I need this. You're really going to sit there and let me struggle when you have the means to help?" I breathed out through my nose, steady. "You're not struggling. You have your mother. You have my parents. You've always had support. I've had to make it on my own. And now that I've finally built something for myself, you all expect me to just hand it over." My mother's eyes narrowed like blades. "Oliver, don't exaggerate. We've done plenty for you. But family means sacrifice. You've always been the practical one. Isla's future is brighter if we all pitch in. You don't want to be the reason she falls behind, do you?" The way she said it, it was like a knife. As if Isla's success or failure was my responsibility. As if I'd be to blame if she didn't get what she wanted. For years, I'd swallowed words like that. Let them guilt me. Let them twist me into believing I was selfish for wanting recognition, for daring to want a fraction of what Isla got every day. But that night, something inside me hardened. I leaned back in my chair, looked each of them in the eye, and said it. I'm not responsible for Isla. I'm not her parent. I've worked for everything I have, and I won't apologize for keeping what I've earned. The table erupted. Isla scoffed, rolling her eyes. Miel shook her head, like I'd just confessed to some unforgivable crime. And my mother's voice rose, sharp enough to cut glass. Oliver, you're being dramatic. No one's asking you to give up everything, just what you don't need. Stop making this harder than it has to be. I glanced at my father. He hadn't spoken, but the neutrality was gone from his face. What I saw instead was disappointment, cold and heavy, like I'd failed some invisible test. I didn't rush to reply. I let the silence stretch, let them feel the weight of what I wasn't saying. For once in my life, I wasn't bending. And then Miel leaned forward, her voice dripping with condescension. Oliver, if you can't be convinced with reason, maybe you need to be reminded. After all, without this family, where would you be? You owe us more than you realize. Her words echoed in the quiet, like a threat wrapped in silk. And in that moment, I realized, this dinner wasn't about asking. It was about control. The silverware clinked once, then died. Plates went cold. Conversation evaporated like steam, and suddenly every pair of eyes at the table felt like it was boring straight into me. You know that feeling, when a room gets too quiet and the silence starts to speak? That was it. Miel leaned in, lowering her voice like she was trying to sound compassionate. That's one of their tricks, the softer the tone, the sharper the blade. Oliver, listen, she said, slow and measured. I know you think you've struggled, but everything you have is because this family was behind you. You had a home, you had meals, without us, you wouldn't be where you are. Don't forget that. A rehearsed line, polished and ready. I almost laughed out loud right in her face. Yes, I had a roof and food. Basic things. But warmth? Genuine encouragement? Someone who cheered when I did something good? Those were luxuries I didn't remember having. Most of my childhood memories were framed by being overshadowed, compared, put second. Usually to Isla. A flash of memory hit me, high school graduation. I walked across a stage with a scholarship clutched in my hand, bubbling with that ridiculous, stupid kind of pride you get when you've scraped and earned something. I ran home wanting to show them, to finally get that small moment of recognition. My mother barely glanced at the certificate before asking if I'd taken the trash out. My dad muttered, good job, at the TV, and then, as if on cue, Miel arrived beaming about Isla's piano recital. They all crowded into the living room, applauding her. My scholarship letter sat on the counter, ignored like a receipt someone forgot to file. I swallowed and looked back at Miel across the table. Her smugness was practically a physical thing. You're right, I said slowly, each word measured. I wouldn't be where I am without this family, because every time you dismissed me, every time you made it clear I wasn't worth investing in, I taught myself how to get by. I learned to fight my own battles. I got here in spite of being overlooked, not because of any favors you think you gave me. For a beat, the room held its breath. My father's jaw tightened so hard a vein pulsed there. My mother's eyes flashed like lightning. Isla, spoon in hand, set it down with a little theatrical clink and wore that predator's smile she reserves for when she thinks she's won. Wow, she said, head tilted, all innocence. So ungrateful. You act like you were abandoned. You had everything you needed. You just can't stand that I'm the one who got attention. It's jealousy, right? Plain and simple. Jealousy. The word stabbed. I turned toward her, hard. Isla, I'm not jealous of you, I said coldly. I pity you. You've never had to do things on your own. Money, opportunities, attention, handed to you on a silver platter. You crumble the moment something isn't fixed for you. That's not enviable. It's frightening. Her face closed off and she shot a look at her mother, like a child looking for backup. Miel jumped in instantly, defensive and sharp. Oliver, don't you dare talk to my daughter like that. She's accomplished things you couldn't even dream of. Talented, gifted, destined. If you cared about family, you'd help her reach her potential. I let that hang there, tasted the irony. Help her reach her potential, translation, hand over what I'd bled and saved for so she could keep playing at being exceptional. I felt my hands on the table, steady despite the hammering in my chest. I thought of nights hunched over textbooks, of 2 jobs, of moments when there was no extra dollar and I still made it through. No one came. No one cheered. Yet now, because I had some small cushion, I was expected to give it up. That's not family, I said, voice low but steady. That's exploitation. My mother cut in before anyone else could recover. Stop being dramatic, Oliver. We're not asking for everything, just a contribution. Something to show you care. You don't want to be remembered as the selfish one, do you? There it was, the old switch, guilt, then shame, then the slow rewriting of events so that their version felt like truth. My mother could take a memory, turn it inside out, and make you doubt what you actually remembered. I used to fall for it. I used to apologize for existing. Not tonight. Tonight I felt the weight of years peel away, layer by layer. I looked at her, really looked, and thought, if loving this family means erasing myself so Isla never has to face the real world, then maybe being selfish is a better future. Maybe keeping what I earned is the only honest kindness left in this house. Just as I opened my mouth to say it, because I could feel the words forming, because finally I was done swallowing, the room shifted. Chairs scraped. A door clicked somewhere in the hall. Heads turned. Miel's smile thinned into a line. My father's disappointment hardened into something else. Everyone leaned forward, expectant, as if whatever came next would decide everything. I could feel the air change. And in that charged silence, right before the next blow landed, I realized this dinner was no longer about tuition. It was a test. And they were about to decide how far they'd push me. Then Miel smiled that same silk smile, but there was a new glint in her eyes, and she said, very softly, well then, Oliver, we'll just have to remind you what family means. The words were polite. But the way the table closed in made my skin crawl. What were they planning? The air in that dining room had become thick, almost unbreathable, when my father finally broke his silence. His voice was low, but it carried that old weight, the kind that once kept me in line as a kid. Oliver, that's enough. You're crossing a line. We've given you more than you realize. You will contribute, and that's final. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't even a discussion. It was a command, delivered in that same tone he used when telling 12-year-old me to mow the lawn before dinner. Except I wasn't 12 anymore. I leaned forward, locking my eyes onto his. No, I said, steady, unwavering. I won't. His face didn't twist in rage. No, that would have been easier. What I saw instead was colder, disappointment wrapped in calculation. The look of a man already planning his next move to reel me back into his orbit. Then my mother's voice cut through, sharp and shrill. Do you realize what you're doing? You're humiliating us in front of your aunt and cousin. You're making yourself look ungrateful. All we're asking is for you to step up for your family. That's what good sons do. Good sons. The phrase hit me like a slap, and I repeated it under my breath. Good sons. The words tasted bitter. Good sons obey. Good sons don't question. Good sons give up everything, even their dignity, for the illusion of family unity. My mind flickered through years of memories, hearing my parents gush about Isla to the neighbors, calling her like another daughter to us. Seeing pictures of them at Miel's table during the holidays, plates full, smiles wide, while I sat alone in my dorm room because they told me they were too busy for me. For a moment, I wanted to stand up, push my chair back, and walk out that door forever. But then a quieter part of me whispered the truth. If I left like that, they'd twist it. They'd say I stormed off. They'd call me unstable, selfish, ungrateful. They'd spin it until I was the villain, and everyone else would nod along. No. If I was going to walk away, it had to be on my terms. They needed to see me, calm and composed, choosing not to bend. So I stayed seated. I let the silence stretch. I let them watch me refuse to break. Finally, Miel leaned forward, her voice coated in disdain, each word sharpened like glass. Oliver, if you really want to prove you're not selfish, then show it tonight. Transfer the money right now. Then we can all put this ugliness behind us and move forward as a family. Every head turned toward me. My father's cold stare. My mother's narrowed eyes. Isla's smug little smirk. Miel's fake patience, her lips pressed into something that pretended to be a smile. The tension wound tighter, like a spring about to snap. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. About whether I was still theirs to command. I sat there, feeling the weight of their stares, the stillness of the house pressing in. And then, slowly, I looked at each of them in turn. I let the silence grow until it was almost unbearable, until the walls themselves seemed to hum with it. Then I said, quiet but firm, each word deliberate. You want me to give up what I've worked for? Fine. But if we're going to talk about sacrifices, then let's finally put everything on the table. The air had gone thick, you could feel it press against your chest. My parents, my aunt, Isla, all of them staring as if I'd sprouted a second head. Miel's eyes narrowed, trying to decode whatever game I was playing, but I gave nothing away. I leaned back and let the silence stretch, watching their discomfort grow like cracks in plaster. I'd spent my life being invisible in plain sight, overlooked, dismissed, treated like a convenience rather than a person. Tonight, that ended. I wasn't just going to refuse them, I was going to force them to reckon with the cost of their indifference. Every slight, every dismissal, every small way they tried to keep me in my place, it was all going to be put on the table. Everything, I said slowly, letting the word land. Everything on the table. And we'll start with what this family has actually cost me, not just money, but time, opportunities, recognition. All the awards and scholarships that went unnoticed, all the nights I worked instead of sleeping, the internships I clawed for while you applauded someone else. It counts. And you're about to see how much. I saw Isla's confident smirk waver. Miel blinked, momentarily off balance. My mother's face set like stone and my father's jaw tightened as if bracing for a fight. I reached behind me and pulled out a worn folder. I'll start with tangible things, I said, opening it. Scholarships, awards, internship offers, things I earned and no one cared to acknowledge. But because I've been careful and saved a little, suddenly my money is up for grabs to cover bills that aren't mine. Miel opened her mouth. I cut her off with a look. Don't. My voice was flat. This isn't about arguing opinions, it's about facts. Remember my first summer job? I asked. I was 15. I wanted a computer for school and I got a part-time gig. You said I wouldn't last a week. That same summer Isla got a new piano. Patterns don't happen by accident. I watched them shift. Their silence was a kind of confession. Isla's face flamed. That's not fair, she protested, voice high. Fair? I echoed. I'm just stating the record. High school, I applied everywhere, worked weekends, pulled all-nighters. My awards? Nice, you said. Not worth fussing over. Meanwhile, Isla's recital gets a standing ovation and a dozen photos. Did any of you show up to my award ceremonies? To my science fair? Ask how I was managing? No. Now you expect me to funnel my savings to her because her mother wrote a text? That's not family. That's entitlement. My father's jaw pulsed. My mother twisted the napkin in her hands until her knuckles went white. I could see a hairline crack in their composure for the first time in years. And here's the worst of it, I continued, voice controlled, each word cold and precise. Even when I did succeed, you tried to turn it into proof that you made me. You owe us, you'd say. Like my drive and late nights meant nothing unless you could claim credit. Like I needed your permission to exist. Miel sputtered something, flustered. Oliver. Not yet. I raised a palm, and for a second the room held its breath. Now, let's talk numbers. I laid out a few pages from the folder, statements and calculations I'd kept tucked away for nights like this. Isla's tuition. Your requests. The way you've tried to maneuver me into handing over my savings as if it were an obligation, it's manipulation. I've gone through my accounts, every cent saved and invested. If I give in now, I hand you leverage. I hand you control. Their faces tightened. Expectation turned to panic in Isla's eyes. My father looked like a man figuring out a problem he thought he had solved long ago, only now the variables had changed. I'm not doing that, I said plainly. I'm done letting you use me as collateral for your peace of mind. If we're talking sacrifices, then we need to make this fair. Everything on the table, debts, favors, the invisible ledger of what you took from me, we go line by line. No more gaslighting. No more guilt. If you want my money, then prove why you deserve it, just like I proved everything to get mine. The room was a study in stunned silence. Someone cleared their throat, a small, useless sound. My mother's lips pressed together. Isla's fingers dug into the edge of her napkin. Miel's smile had gone brittle. And in that charged, brittle space, I realized the night had finally split in two. On one side, the life I'd been expected to keep living, pliant, accommodating, forever the good son. On the other, the line I'd drawn. They all stared at me as if waiting to see which side I'd choose. I had chosen. I pushed my chair back and reached for another folder, thicker this time. Bank statements, receipts, pay stubs, everything I'd saved and organized over the years like a quiet little ledger of my life. I spread the papers across the table so they couldn't pretend they didn't exist. The paper rustled loud in the silence. You could hear it like a drumbeat. This is my money, I said, and I watched their faces as the words landed. I earned every cent. Not from handouts. Not because you tossed me a bone when it was convenient. Not because I played along with your favorites. I worked for this. My finger traced a line on a bank statement, slow and deliberate. And yet here you are, acting like being related to me gives you a legal claim. You want to guilt me into sacrificing my future for Isla? Fine. Let's flip the script. Let's see what happens when the roles are reversed. Color drained from Isla's face first, she went pale mid-bite, fork frozen halfway. But it wasn't just her, my parents and Miel looked like people watching a building crack in slow motion. Their posture that had always been smug and composed was suddenly faltering. You could almost see the choreography of their authority unraveling. You see, I went on, calmer than I felt, I've been patient. I thought I could handle this without drama. I let the silence swallow things because I didn't want to fight. But you've been relentless, taking my energy, my time, my recognition, and now you think my savings are just another line item in the family budget. That stops tonight. My mother's lips trembled. Oliver, she began. I didn't let her finish. I'm not handing over my savings. Not to appease a guilt trip. Not to reinforce a system that treats me like an ATM. I paused, watching their reactions carefully, then I let a small, almost satisfied smile slip. Part of my savings? They're not sitting in a piggy bank somewhere. I invested them. Months ago. In a business I started quietly, an online venture I built from the ground up. And yes, I let the sentence hang, it directly competes with some of the little projects you like to brag about at dinner. Silence hit the room like a physical thing. Isla's fork clattered back into her plate. Miel's jaw worked as if she was trying to swallow a lie. My father leaned forward, the calm gone from his face and replaced by something tight and unreadable. My mother's hand flew up to cover her mouth, fingers shaking. This business, I said slowly, tasting each word, is not a hobby. It's a company with contracts, customers, and a growth plan. I built it because I was tired of relying on crumbs of attention. I studied what people actually needed and fixed the mistakes I saw in how you run things, how you confuse bluster for care, how you trade appearances for substance. Those lessons shaped my model. It's lean, it's smart, and yes, it's designed to outperform a certain small market of services that have come to mean so much to you. Miel's voice trembled when she spoke. Oliver, you can't. Oh, I can, I interrupted, soft but unyielding. I can and I will. Because I'm done giving you leverage. If you think you can bully me now, if you think that a family text can still make me cave, you're wrong. You wanted entitlement? Fine. You'll see the consequences when I stop being the fallback and start being the competition. What I didn't say out loud, what I kept folded in the corner of my mouth, was that this wasn't just bravado. I had taken precautions. Separate accounts, an LLC, a business bank line, contracts with a designer and a developer. I'd moved money into investments and set up protections so that no single text could siphon me dry. I'd hired people I trusted. I'd learned lessons from every insult, every dismissive comment, and I'd turned them into a plan that didn't need their permission to succeed. You want proof? I asked, because their silence begged for it. You want to know where the money is? I'll show you the books. We can put everything on the table, their tuition, your requests, and what you actually did for me over the years. We'll go line by line. No spin. No rewriting. No more emotional accounting where your memory is the final word. Miel's smile had slipped into something thin and hard. You do that? Expose family matters, she said, as if shame could be used to weaponize me into compliance. Expose? I echoed. Or simply clarify? My voice was steady. I'm not trying to humiliate anyone, I'm trying to make things fair. If we're going to ask for sacrifices, then everyone has to be willing to account for what they took and what they gave. Not just now, but over the years. My father's hands curled into fists under the table. My mother's eyes leaped, anger, fear, I couldn't tell which. Isla sat frozen, lips white. The table felt smaller, the walls closer. Then, and only then, I felt the shift. Whatever power they'd always assumed, whatever invisible ownership of me they'd acted entitled to, fractured. For the first time, they looked unsure. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something like fear cross my father's face. I closed the folder and leaned back, letting them stew in it. This is simple, I said. I will not be your ATM. I will not finance entitlement. If your argument is built on sacrifice, then we sacrifice together, and we account together. Otherwise, I keep what I worked for, and I build without your permission. Miel's voice came out thin and sharp. You'll regret this, Oliver. Maybe I would. But I felt the hard click of a lock falling into place inside me, the lock that sealed off the part of me that had always bent. Whatever came next, I knew I'd crossed a line. The question now was which of them would try to cross back. The room shifted like a tide turning. For the first time in my life, the confident masks they always wore slipped, just enough to show the doubt underneath. Their assurance, that quiet, unspoken ownership they always assumed over me, dissolved in the space of a heartbeat. They could no longer take for granted that I would fold. Then Isla made the mistake that cracked everything open. Wait, what? You're competing with us, she blurted, voice trembling as if she'd lost her footing. I let my calm settle over the table like a slow, deliberate wave. Yes, Isla. I am. My tone was steady, almost boring in its certainty. And from now on, whenever you try to treat my life like a buffet you can help yourself from, you'll see what happens when the serving is taken away. The silence that followed wasn't ceremonious. It felt raw and exposed, the kind of quiet that makes people glance around, suddenly unsure whether the next moment will be awkward or catastrophic. My parents' mouths moved, then snapped closed. Miel's fingers found the hem of the tablecloth and twisted it until the fabric creased. The air felt thin, sharp as glass. All those old resentments that had sat like sediment inside me were rising now. I hadn't just been saying no, I'd been gathering evidence, patience, and plans. Tonight I wasn't merely refusing their demand, I was seizing the story. You mean, your business? Isla's voice hitched halfway through the question like she couldn't quite believe the syllables. I allowed a small, controlled nod. Yes, my business. I let that land. Something I built quietly over months, watching, learning, and fixing the things I saw you do wrong. Small enough to stay out of your radar, smart enough to compete where it matters. I could see the way her smirk drained out of her face, replaced by an expression that was almost fear. It was startling, watching entitlement become unsettled. Miel's composure splintered first. She opened her mouth and shut it like she was searching for the script she always leaned on. That's impossible, she managed, the disbelief thick in every word. It's not impossible, I said. It's deliberate. I invested the savings I earned, not in frivolous things, but in a business model that actually works. Contracts, customers, a team, systems. I learned from your showmanship and built the exact opposite, substance over spectacle. And yes, it competes directly with some of the ventures you brag about at dinner. My father shifted, a small, telltale movement, one I'd seen 100 times that meant he was recalculating. My mother's face tightened, losing that casual smugness that had been her armor. Isla's hands, which had been fiddling with a napkin a moment before, were suddenly still. You'll ruin everything, my mother spat, the edge of panic in her voice. I already have, I said, letting the truth fall slowly so they could feel each syllable. I'm not giving you my savings. I'm not handing over my future. What I am taking is permanence, the freedom to build something that belongs to me, and the leverage that proves I'm not yours to manipulate. From now on, when you try to guilt me into obedience, the cost will be paid by you. Their faces were a map of shock, anger, calculation, and, if I was honest, a little fear. This was territory they hadn't charted before. For years they'd leaned on me, now I was the one leaning forward. I closed my eyes for a second, tasting the metallic tang of adrenaline at the back of my throat. I'd set wheels in motion, contracts filed, accounts separated, people I trusted who would keep the work moving even if this house tried to pull me back. I hadn't been bluffing. When I opened my eyes again, all of them were watching, waiting to see what I'd do next. Would I fold? Would I storm out? Or would I take the next step and make this choice irreversible? I looked at them, at the table, at the folder of papers I'd spread like evidence, and I realized the night had just begun, and they did. Over the next few weeks, the ripple effect of my choices became undeniable. The quiet moves I'd set in place, the partnerships I'd built, the contracts I'd secured, started to show their weight. Clients who had once been loyal to Miel's consulting firm shifted toward me. Not because I begged for them, but because I offered better. More efficient systems, smarter services, competitive pricing without cutting corners. Her business began to stumble, visibly, painfully. Isla's so-called future in business? Suddenly it looked less like a bright path and more like sand slipping through her fingers. Deals she assumed were hers to claim were signed with me instead. The cracks in their empire of favoritism widened, and I didn't have to push, they collapsed under their own weight. When I finally sat across from my parents again, the change in the air was sharp enough to taste. Anger, yes, but it was laced with something far rarer from them. Fear. You've gone too far, my father said at last, his voice tight, his jaw clenched. I leaned back, calm, steady. No, I said. I've gone exactly far enough. You tried to control my choices, my money, my future. All I did was prove that control is nothing but smoke if it isn't earned. I never needed your support to succeed, but I learned exactly how to turn your weaknesses into my advantage. And I did. My mother tried to mount an argument, her voice rising, but I stopped her cold. No apologies. No explanations. I've been patient for years while you treated me like an ATM, while you erased me at every family gathering. That ends today. Isla will get nothing from me. Miel, your business is failing because of your mistakes, not mine. And you, I looked at my parents, will never again dictate my life under the guise of family duty. That's reality now. The silence after that felt heavy, final. Isla exploded first, storming out with a door slam that rattled the frames. Miel chased after her, muttering about betrayal, her face a mask of outrage and humiliation. My parents? They stayed seated at that table, stunned into silence. For once, they had no script to fall back on. The little empire of guilt and manipulation they had built around me had collapsed, and it was their own hands that pulled it down. Weeks later, my footing was stronger than ever. My savings remained untouched. My business wasn't just stable, it was thriving. And the leash they had always tried to keep around me, both financial and emotional, was gone for good. Isla scrambled desperately to cover her tuition without me. Miel's reputation among our extended network faltered, word spreading about her attempt to corner me. And my parents, well, they were left with an unshakable truth: I was no longer their pawn. I didn't forgive them. I didn't need to. They had revealed themselves years ago, but the dinner that night and the weeks that followed carved it in stone. I had reclaimed more than money. I reclaimed power, dignity, the right to stand on my own name without apology. The house was still theirs. The family dinners continued without me. Isla's voice? It carried no weight in my life anymore. I had stepped out of the shadow of entitlement and into my own light. And there was nothing they could do, nothing, that could drag me back. In the end, I had what I worked for all along: control over my own life, the respect I deserved, and proof that patience and persistence could break even the deepest chains of a toxic family. They remained the villains. And I? I remained unbroken, standing firmly on my own. Thanks for listening. If this story hit you, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe, because there's plenty more to come.